Okay, we're in Mark chapter 12. Mark chapter 12. There's a young man, he's a teacher of the law, and he comes to Jesus and he says, "What is the greatest commandment? Of all the commandments, what's the greatest one?" Now that's quite an ask here, because there are 613 commandments in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible. 613 of them. By the way, 365 of those 613 are negative commandments, like don't do this and don't do that, thou shalt not steal, and thou shalt not kill, and all that. And then there are 248 of them that are positive commandments you should do, like honor your father and mother, and remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, and all that. 613 out of all of those. What's the most important one? And Jesus answers him. He answers him in an unexpected way. He says, the most important one, this is in verse 29 of Mark 12, the most important one, says Jesus, is this: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength." And the second one is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And there is no command greater than these. Of all the 613 commands, here are two of them. It's kind of like one coin with two sides. Love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, the first one that Jesus gave, it was called the Shema. In Deuteronomy chapter 6 is where we find this. And Jewish people would recite the Shema every day. When Jesus was just a little boy, and all throughout his life, he quoted the Shema every day, recited it. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength." That's the Shema. And that one's obvious. Everybody would know that that's a very important law, that of all the commands, this is one. So the first one is love God with everything. The second is love your neighbor, and that's from Leviticus 19. And it's tucked away in this obscure passage called the Holiness Code. And in this, there's stuff about diet and stuff, and things you're supposed to eat, and stuff you're supposed to wear. And then it talks about how to treat your neighbor, and how to treat a stranger, and the person that lives right next to you. And then tucked away in Leviticus 19 is this one: love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so Jesus takes this one out of Leviticus 19, takes the Shema, smooshes them together like an Oreo cookie. And he says, here it is, this is what it is. This is the biggest thing, the most important one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. I was at a meeting, a doctrinal symposium just a couple of months ago. And so these theologians all came together, and they were talking about discipleship. What is discipleship? What is discipleship all about? How do we do discipleship? And Ken Shank, who is one of the greatest scholars in the New Testament in the entire Wesleyan Church, he gave an address, and he said, I studied it deeply. I studied the entire New Testament, just perusing it deeply to say, okay, what does it say about discipleship? And I came up with this. The bottom line of discipleship is love God with all your heart and love your neighbor. And that's it. That's it. We complicate it, don't we? We turn it into the 613, when really what we ought to do is go back to the main thing. I did this with my students a while back. I said, okay, guys, I want you to write down on the wall. No, they didn't write on the wall. There was a big Post-it note on the wall. Write this on the wall. What practices make a person like a good Christian? What are things that you would expect a good Christian person to do, a follower of Jesus, that they would do? And go write it on the wall. So they went over and they started writing all kinds of stuff on the wall. You know, go to church and tithe and pray and read your Bible and all this stuff on the wall. And they said, okay, now what I want you to do is to cross off all of them that could be used to describe the Pharisees of Jesus's day. And they started crossing them all off. Like 90% of everything got crossed off. Isn't that amazing? Now, there's nothing wrong with going to church. That's a very, very good thing to do. It's a wonderful practice that we should do. And certainly we should be generous kind of people, and we should pray and read the Bible. Of course we should. Of course we should. These things are very good. But if we do all the 613 without the big thing, then we're missing the whole point. And so this is what the Pharisees were doing. They were focusing on the little things, but they forgot the big thing. And so let's take a look at that today. The first one of the big thing here, where it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. This is the great commandment. Now that brings up a question. How can love possibly be commanded? You can't command love. You can't say, you have to love me. Like, some of you guys, just try that on your girlfriend. See how that works. You got to love me or else. You have to. Well, no, I really don't. Well, yes, you do. No, that doesn't work very well that way. Or a boss saying that to the employees. You all have to love me because I'm your boss. You have to. I command it. That doesn't make sense. Love can't be commanded, but yet it's called the Great Commandment. So how does that fit? There's only one way that makes sense. There's only one way, and I've thought about it, I've struggled with it. There's only one way that I can figure out that it makes sense. And it's this, that he loves us that way first. That he loves us with all his heart and all his soul and all his mind and all his strength. Now let that soak in just for a minute. That God, the creator of the universe, loves you with all his heart. Think about the passion of God, the deepest passion that you can ever imagine, that he created you with. Think about the time that you've loved more than you've ever loved, ever. That one moment. Maybe it was when you held a newborn baby in your arms. Or maybe it was the day that you were married. Or that there was some special day. And your heart was just bursting with love. This passionate, beautiful, awesome love. And that's just a teeny tiny little thimble compared to the passionate love that God has for you. He loves you with all his heart and all his soul. His soul. This goes to the depths of your being. When you're deep down to the bottom place, the place of the greatest core of your identity, of who you are. When you think about that, that's your soul. And you think about the deepest place of who God is and what is his soul like, that from that, he loves you with all of his soul, with the depths of his being. And he's the greatest being that's ever been. And there's no being that goes deeper, drills deeper than that. There's nothing like that. And with that being, he loves you. In fact, one theologian called him the ground of all being. He loves you with all of his soul. And how about his mind? How about his mind? Take all the most brilliant people ever in history, people like Einstein, people, all of the great thinkers, and you put them all together and all the great thoughts that they ever had, and you put all those thoughts, it would be a tiny thimble compared to the ocean of his great thoughts. Like the greatest thought we ever had is nothing compared to the smallest God's ever had. He's thought up every great thought. He thought up everything before you ever thought it. And with that creative brilliance, that mind that's way beyond anything we could ever possibly comprehend, he loves you with all of his mind. And how about strength? Strength, the one who flings out universes, who creates worlds just by speaking it. Although here's my theory. I don't think he just said it. Like when God said that it was good and it was good, he said it and boom, there it was and it was good. No, I think he sang it. I think that he just sang the universe into motion. In fact, some of the Hebrew rabbis, they say that he sang it. Wouldn't that be cool? That the very first thing that God did in the creative process was a song. But with all that power, all of that majestic strength and power, he loves you. He loves you. And so if we understand this and we can grasp this, and it's hard to even comprehend that with all of his heart and all of his soul and all of his mind and all of his strength that he loves us, then that commands our love. We can't help but love him back when we know how much he loves us. Of course I'm going to love him back because he first loved me. We love him because he first loved us. And that's what it is. That he loves us, and then we just say yes. We respond by loving him back. So, how do you do this? To love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. How do we do that? I think of it as a two-part process. The first part is what I call fully devoted, and the second part is fully developing. Fully devoted, fully developing. Fully devoted means all in. Completely committed, all in, 100%, all the way. And this is not something you grow into. You don't grow into it. Like you could be like a Christian, you could come to church every single Sunday for years and years and years and years and still not be fully devoted. You really can't. You're not going to get it by social osmosis. It doesn't happen just by waiting around for it to happen. Being fully devoted is like going off a high dive. It isn't just waiting a little bit at a time, checking it out to see if it's going to work. You have to take the dive. I remember the very first time I went off a high dive. You can't halfway high dive. You're either in or you're not. You're either going or you're not. Like I remember I was on my hands and knees crawling out to the end. It took me about 45 minutes. Now it took me a while to get there, but when I was in all the way. It was no halfway commitment there. I was committed all the way in. All the way to the deep end of the pool. And it works in marriage too. I remember the day that Kathy and I were married and she came walking down that aisle. She was so beautiful. My heart was just captured as she comes down the aisle and the preacher says, "Mark, do you take this woman to be your wedded wife?" And I meant to say it boldly. I meant to say it with gusto, but it came out like this. It came out, "I do." Everybody went, "She's marrying Mickey Mouse." I do. But why was I so overcome with emotion there? Why? Because I was all in. I thought this amazing person said she's going to spend the rest of her life with me. Like. I didn't say it. She didn't say it. Like, well, we'll check it out and see how it works. We didn't say that. That wasn't the vow. It wasn't, well, we'll give it a half a try. How about? No, we're all in, all the way, and you dive in. That's the only way that it works. And this is called holiness, by the way. The Wesleyans have called it down through the centuries, where you're all in for Jesus, filled up and overflowing with the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit. And when you're filled with the Spirit, that it pushes out the junk of your life, and that you're all in for him, 100%, all in, not half and half, all in all. That's fully devoted. But then there's another part, fully developing. And there's not one person here in this room that's fully developed yet. You haven't fully developed. We are growing day by day by day. We're growing in this thing, growing in our grace. And sometimes we zig, sometimes we zag, sometimes it's a mountaintop, sometimes it's a valley, sometimes we make stupid mistakes, but we pick ourselves up and we keep going because we're fully devoted. So full devotion is not the end. It isn't like way at the end of your journey and you're on your deathbed and just about ready to, I think I'm fully devoted, and then you're dead. That's not the way it works. No, you full devote up front, and then you grow and grow and grow, day by day by day. And how beautiful is that? Because what it means is a 12-year-old can be fully devoted, but they're not fully developed. They're going to keep on growing and developing all the way along. Now, God has given us such a beautiful way to love him. And this is what it means in this developing process, to love him, to continue loving him, to develop in our loving him with all of our heart, our soul, our mind, and our strength. And now I have a theory, and I'm going to try it out on you. And I've done this now in a few places. I've tested it, and so far it's worked out pretty well. But here's my theory, that every one of us in our developmental stage, growing in our grace, that we have a spiritual love language. There's a certain way that we're just kind of wired to love God the best. Now, it might be one or two of these, but these love languages Jesus describes right here: heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so I'm just going to unpack it, and then you tell me which one you think you are. Probably you're one or two of these. One or two of these are more like your major. One or two of them are more like your minor. All right? So, heart. The heart people are the passionate people. They're the ones that love singing. Like, they're the ones, like when the music's playing and we're just all, they're the ones that go like this. They're like, so they stand in the front and they just, let me in. Whoops. This thing is in my, okay, there we go. I love Jesus. Yes, I do. I love Jesus. How about you? And they just full throttle all the way in. Yeah, let's do this. I love music. I love worship. Like, I love cranking it up. Maybe the radio as you're going down the road, just listening to you and Jesus, just praising God together. You get enthused. In fact, you can't understand why people would be quiet. So what's the matter with these people? Let's get some life. Let's make this thing happen. This is life. Life. God brings us life, and so let's come alive. Those are the passionate people. Now, the second group, I'll go the opposite. These are the mind people. Love God with all your mind. They're more like the intellectuals. They're the ones that like to dig it out. They study it, they dig it out. They say, oh, look at this in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. Look at, do you see that? See the connections to the Old Testament over here? Isn't that amazing? And they like to ask deep questions and they ponder deep thoughts. They like to talk about theology and stuff. And so, like, for them, one of the best things is to just unpack together something deep and meaningful. So the passion people, the first group, they love the worship side of the music part of the church service more, generally speaking. And the intellectual mind people, they like the sermon part more. So, like, the mind people, they're like saying, okay, let's get on with these preliminaries so we can get on to the real meat and potatoes. And then the passion people are saying, these are the meat and potatoes. What are you talking about? I mean, this is the other thing. That's just the after effect. And that's okay. It's like dessert, but this is really what it is over here. The soul people, those are the contemplatives. They're the ones who like to be alone. They love solitude. They would be the kind that would be more likely to journal, to jot notes and stuff about their life, processing life deeply. The poetic people, they really might like music, but they're not this kind of music people. They'd be more like, quiet piano or violin type music kind of stuff, sort of quiet little background music. They would tend to gain energy by being alone versus by being in a big crowd of people. And they're soulful. And then the strength people, the strength are the get it done people. They say, let's just not sit around talking about it. Let's get something done around here. And so the strength people are the ones that roll up their sleeves. They're the ones that show up on church work day. Let's get things done around here. They're the ones that would bake cookies. If there was a neighbor that ended up in the hospital or lost a loved one, they'd be bringing, cookies or cutting somebody's grass who needs some help or something like that. The doers are also the ones that would be more likely to take up a cause, and they would say, well, this is wrong and somebody's got to do something about it. Or maybe they're good leaders. Excellent leaders are usually doer kind of people. So they have a plan and they map out the plan. They make it happen. All right, so think about it now. Which one or two? You get to pick one or two of these. Which one is more like you, okay? So how many of you are heart people, the passion people? Raise your hand. If you're like one of those, raise both hands. Yeah, that's right. Stand up and, no, just kidding. You don't have to stand up and raise both hands. Yeah, okay. There's several of you that are passion. That's great. That's awesome. How many of you are more like the intellectual mind people? I love digging, reading, studying. Okay, yeah. Now, you know what's interesting? In this service, we had more of the heart people, the percentage-wise, and less of the studier. In the other service, it was the opposite. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Wow, cool. Okay. Anyway, the third group, how about the contemplatives? How many of you are like, just put me alone. Let me have some quiet. Let me just be Jesus and me. Yeah, there you go. Okay. How about, no, doer. Like, get something done. Let's make something happen around here. Okay, awesome. Great, 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 great. All right. So let me give you just a couple of things, implications of this. First of all, first thing is this. Don't judge somebody else by your spiritual love language. So if you're one of the heart people and you love it, man, I love it, man. This is just great. What's the matter with those people who sit in the back and don't want to jump into this thing? Like, come on, jump with Jesus with me. And the mind person who's sitting in the back saying, I really don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. That doesn't mean that they don't love Jesus as much as you. They might love Jesus just as much. They just have a different pathway, a different way of expressing it. And likewise, let's say that you do a Bible study on Leviticus and you invite the whole church and nobody shows up. Don't think that they're non-Christians because they don't want to come to your study on Leviticus. Maybe that they're not interested in digging deep into Leviticus. That doesn't mean that they don't love God and His Word and stuff. It just means that they don't like to dig the way you like to dig, and that's okay. You can give grace to that for each other. The contemplative, like if you're alone and all that, and you look and you say, well, what's the matter with those people? Don't they need to have more time alone with God? Well, yeah, maybe, but maybe that's your way. Like I did this with my staff one time. I told them all, I said, guys, go out. I want you to take a whole day, an entire day, just you and Jesus, a prayer retreat. You can't come back to the office. You have to be in solitude for a prayer retreat all day long and overnight, actually. And I paid for them to do this. One of those guys came back and says, don't you ever do that to me again, ever. And I said, what? He says, I went bonkers. After about like an hour. I was just like, oh. And I said, serious? I thought that was going to be replenishing for you. I thought it would be helpful. He goes, no, it just drove me nuts. And I said, well, what would make you happy? What would fill your soul? He said, send me to the nursing home. Let me visit people in the nursing home. That's what does it for me. I said, you're kidding, right? Like to go to the nursing home and actually fill you up? That would just drain the daylights out of me. I mean, it's rewarding, but I can't imagine like that would fill my tank. But for him, he was a doer. Like that was his way. It was his love language. And so for him, the solitude thing was harder for him. And so for me, I like the contemplative thing, and the other one was harder for me. So we don't judge another person by our love language. Secondly, don't judge yourself by another person's love language. And that's pretty important because, like, you might say, well, man, I wish I could study the Bible like, Joe over there. Well, he just knows so much about it, and I don't know anything. I mean, I really don't. I feel stupid. And I wish I must not be a very good Christian because I don't spend an hour in prayerful solitude every day. I just don't like that. And, well, don't judge yourself by another person's love language. My thought is, I'm going to take this thing off my ear. That's what my thought. Okay, here it is. Okay. My thought is this. To be the best version of who you are, who God made you to be. Just live into that. Live into that fully without trying to compare yourself to somebody else. But when Jesus said this, he didn't use the word or in between each of those words. Love the Lord your God with all your heart or your soul or your mind or your strength. He said, and. You know what that means? That you take your major, whatever it is, your one or two that are your major, and you just live into those, but bump it up on the other ones too. Experiment. Try out some of the other ones too. Think of it like the control panels on a PA system, where this one's higher, this one's lower, this one needs to be bumped up just a little bit. And you may never, if you're an activist, you'll never be a contemplative. That's okay. That's all right. But you could try a little bit of it. So let's say that you're like one of those mind people, right? And you love the sermon part. You don't like the music part. You can hardly wait for that part to be done. And you would never, ever imagine yourself, doing this. Well, how about this? Next Sunday, just stretch just a little bit. Just stretch it out a little bit. Like, okay, maybe just go this. Just try it. See what happens. It might help you out. It might stretch you just a little bit. Or maybe like you think, well, I just don't really do theology, and I don't want to really do a deep dive. Studying the Bible, I just can't imagine. Well, why don't you try it for a change? Just give it a shot. Why don't you try? Just dig down into something, like the book of Romans, for instance. Just say, I'm just going to dive deep, and go about 4 layers deeper than I normally would. If you're a doer, maybe what you do is to go over to the Potter's Place over by Southern Wesleyan University. They have prayer cabins over there. And just go there for an hour. Don't go overnight. Don't go all day long. It'll kill you. It'll drive you nuts. Don't do that. Just go for an hour. Just try that and see how it works. Because that'll stretch you. And if you're the more contemplative type, and you would never imagine being the one to sign up to help with a funeral dinner or church work day, well, sign up for something, even though you wouldn't normally do it. Because what it does is it stretches you. You live in your primary love language, and then you stretch in the other ones. And you'll probably never be all the way full 10s on all 4 of them, but all of them can be harmony in your life.